St. Louis City Hall, Episode 1.
Why does a baby cry?
Just after being born,
You would cry too,
if you had just
forgotten everything. While doing research on the City Hall building in St. Louis, we began to notice some interesting patterns, connections, and details when considering the history of not only City Hall, but many of the buildings that surround it. Too many buildings, in fact, to be covered in this one video. Rest assured, we are on the case, and all buildings will eventually be featured that have a story worth telling.
looking at the map of downtown St. Louis, zooming in around Market Street and Tucker Boulevard, there are quite a few buildings that stand out from the rest. The configuration of the area surrounding City Hall is as follows.
City Hall at Market Street and South Tucker Boulevard. Directly next to City Hall to the west is the Municipal Courts Building at Market, South 14th Street. On the other side, east of City Hall, directly across South Tucker Boulevard, is the Carnahan Courthouse Building along Market Street. Catty corner from City Hall and Market Street and South Tucker Boulevard, and across the street from the Carnahan Courthouse is the Civil Courts Building. And just behind and to the side of the Carnahan Courthouse is the Thomas F. Eagleton Courthouse at 111 South 10th Street. Now on the satellite it shows across Market to Pine along South 14th Street. There was recently some odd construction happening with the Soldiers Memorial at 1315 Chestnut Street across the street from the Municipal Courts Building. That's no longer the case. Also at a diagonal line along the northeast, there is what seems to be an alignment of City Hall, the Civil Courts Building, the Southwestern Bell Headquarters Building, and the old Post Office and Customs House.
Lastly, even though it's the furthest building from the set, it aligns with the Civil Courts Building and the Arch. Of course, I'm talking about the iconic building that looks like a Capitol building, but is not, the old courthouse. In total, we're going to be discussing 9 buildings, 8 of which are pretty old, while the 9th is included for a bit of context, since it is a relatively recent construction.
A few quick things to remember before we get into it. Bricks have been around since BC times, but have been handmade until around 1870 or so when brick-making machines became more available. Now, production went from around 1 to 80 bricks per minute, to put it in perspective. In the late 1800s, according to the narrative, granite and limestone were plentiful, with quarries nearly everywhere in the United States. It was common and even anticipated that such massive and elaborate buildings could be constructed in a couple years or less. According to one source, it was common for someone to be an artisan builder in the United States during the 1800s. Lastly, according to the mainstream narrative, fires are able to burn down brick and even stone buildings. Now, is it interesting to note then that chimneys and ovens are made out of brick and stone?
The plan is to make a separate video featuring each of the above-mentioned 9 buildings in downtown St. Louis. This video will be focusing in on the City Hall building located at 1200 Market Street. According to the narrative, this building was constructed between 1890 and 1904. It was completed just in time for the St. Louis World's Fair exposition. Sit back, relax, and get ready to count some fires and have your mind blown at some examples of impossible buildings in America that only took a year to build, according to the mainstream narrative. Let's get into the weeds on this deep dive.
The established narrative of the City Hall building, located in downtown St. Louis on Market Street and South Tucker, formerly known as 12th Street, goes a little something like this. According to the website stlouismo.gov, we have the City Hall, having housed city government since 1898, is a landmark by appearance, reputation, and city designation. City Hall sits on part of a 6-acre site, now known as Washington Square, that originally was part of the Shodo Hill Pond Tract. The location of the current City Hall was acquired by the city for $25,000 from Thomas Smith on December 1st, 1840. 50 years would pass before construction began on what is now the current City Hall.
The early years. Here comes the fire stories. In the first years of the city government, the town fathers met in private homes, banks, saloons, anywhere they could find a meeting place. In 1827, the council voted to spend $13,000 to build a combination city hall/market on the Place des Hommes, located on the riverfront on the south side of Market Street and Walnut. The building was saved from the 1849 fire that destroyed much of downtown. However, the building was razed the following year. Although the original building no longer exists, a representation can be seen in the mural Front Street in 1840 inside the main entrance, located at Tucker Boulevard, of the present City Hall.
In 1851, another City Hall building was constructed using funds from a bond issue. Then fire struck again in 1856, this time claiming the structure. Left without a building, city officials rented space in the old courthouse, leasing one of the wings for about $1,000 a year. The city council discussed building a third city hall in 1868, but decided in 1872 to erect a temporary building known as the quote-unquote the barn. The first building to be used solely as City Hall was built on the block bounded by 11th, 12th, Market, and Chestnut Street. This temporary 3-story building cost $70,000. The quote-unquote the barn was used as City Hall until 1898 and stood until it was finally razed in 1921.
The current City Hall. Now, this is going to be interesting because this actually explains in depth a little bit more about the process that other buildings don't seem to follow, that they claim are built in 2 years or less, according to the narrative. Let's check it out. With municipal functions outgrowing the old city barn, efforts to build what would become the current City Hall got underway in May 1888, when the City Hall Commission was formed. On April 4th, 1889, an ordinance was passed to authorize the commission to advertise for bids for the building. The original cost was not to exceed $1 million. The commission chose the design of George Richard Mann of the firm Eckel and Mann of St. Joseph from the 37 national entries. Now, out of the 37 entries and designs of Mann, not Eckel, and I want you to remember this. Now, his design was titled St. Louis, 1892, obviously expecting it to be completed by 1892. Only 2 years to build. A French-style plan inspired by the Hôtel de Ville or City Hall Paris. We'll come back and take a look at this building in a few. With ornamental dormer windows and former towers, it also recalled the architectural elements of the Château Cambourg on the Loire River in France.
The construction of City Hall started July 19th, 1890, with Mayor Edward Noonan's daughter Zoe breaking ground. The cornerstone was laid on June 6, 1891. The narrative says this building took 14 years to build, which is reasonable, but much longer than many of these types of buildings we have seen only taking a couple years or less to build. It was merely a lack of funds and not ability that stalled this endeavor.
No bond issue was passed to finance construction of the new City Hall, explaining the 14 years required to finish the building. Funds came from general revenue and the sale of city property. Every year or two, the council would authorize an average of $110,000 to continue construction. An ordinance was passed on September 10th, 1893, to limit the total cost at $2 million. Though the building was not completed, it was finally occupied on April 11th, 1898, when Mayor Henry Zeigenheim headed a ceremonial parade of city officials from the old building to their offices in the new City Hall.
Now in 1904, the final portions of the building were completed: the rotunda, the Tucker Boulevard vestibule, and the grand staircase, using the design by the St. Louis architectural firm of Weber and Groves. The building was officially completed on the 5th of November, 1904, when Mayor Rolla Wells held an open house for the residents of St. Louis. The final cost of the building, are we ready, was $1,787,159.16. They list down to the cent. Is this for real? Is this trying to give the illusion they are on top of things and this information is accurate down to the red cent?
The exterior of City Hall was never quite finished. All sides of the building have ornamental dormers called belvederes, each having bare spaces of limestone. These were meant to have carved decorations, yet remain untouched, probably due to lack of funds. Despite its incomplete state, City Hall was praised for its splendid architectural composition and called an impressive period piece of craftsmanship? Yeah, I believe you.
A poorly executed acid cleaning and years of exposure to coal smoke has left the original pink and orange exterior tarnished. Former Mayor Clarence Harmon commissioned a study of the building's structural and cosmetic problems in 1998. The building's design is in the French Renaissance Revival style, with a ground story constructed of dressed pink granite, while the upper stories are made of yellow brick and sandstone. Originally, there were towers as part of the construction, but, of course, these were removed in 1934.
Now it's time to check the architects. The chosen design for the City Hall building was an entry from George Richard Mann of the firm Eckel and Mann of St. Joseph from 37 national entries. Mann, being the actual designer of the winning entry, was apparently part of an architectural dynamic duo known as Eckel and Mann. Let's take a look at the buildings Eckel and Mann produced over their careers.
According to Wiki, the story for Edmund J. Eckel, 1845 to 1934, goes something like, in 1880, he was the founder of Eckel and Mann, later Eckel and Aldrich and Brunner, which was the oldest architectural firm in Missouri, prior to its eventual dissolution in 1999. Now let's take a look at the buildings they produced. So first up, we have the Wyeth Tooth Mansion, a castle mansion in the Gothic Italian Renaissance Revival style designed to emulate castles along the Rhine River in Germany. The House of William Wyeth, now known as the Wyeth Tootle Mansion in St. Joseph, was designed by Boatner and Eckel and completed in 1879, same year designed. Really?
From Wiki. Wholesale Row, also known as the Wholesale Row Historic District, is a National Historic District located at St. Joseph, Missouri. The district originally encompassed 5 contributing buildings and an industrial/commercial section of St. Joseph on the western edge of the central business district. The Noyes Norman Building, 1872, on 3rd Street, has been demolished. It was developed between about 1872 and 1884 and includes representative examples of Italianate-style architecture. The remaining buildings are the R.L. McDonald & Co. Building, 1880, Englehart Winning Co. North Building, 1884, Englehart Winning Co. South Building, 1880, and Brittain Richardson & Co. Building, 1882. The remaining buildings were all designed by the architect Edmund Jacques Eckel, 1845 to 1934. Look, modern brick buildings, dates next to buildings like birthdays for houses, with little details. Is there more to this group than meets the eye?
The houses of Adam N. Schuster on the right and James W. Hingston on the left in St. Joseph were designed by Eckel and Mann and completed in 1881 and 1888, respectively. This is according to the Library of Congress website, which states initial construction was the same year, 1881, for Schuster House as it was designed. Next up, we have the Pottawatomie County Courthouse, Council Bluffs in Iowa. This is courtesy of the iowacourts.gov website. Pottawatomie County was organized in 1848. At that time, a 2-story log house was used as a courthouse. Later, the structure was abandoned and rooms were rented for county business. The Board of Supervisors purchased the site in Council Bluffs for $3,500, and in 1868, a courthouse was completed on this land for a cost of $42,000. After only 16 years, the second courthouse was declared unsafe, and a new $141,800 building was constructed. The courthouse was completed in 1888 and served Pottawatomie County for many years. The present courthouse was built in 1977 on the same piece of land as the former courthouse. From info presented, it appears to be the 3rd building in this spot, completed in 1888. This building, in my opinion, is one of the most similar to the City Hall in St. Louis. And we have another tower removed situation.
Next up, the Central Police Station, also known as the National Military Heritage Museum, is a historic police station located at 701 Messinai in St. Joseph, Missouri. It was designed by Eckel and Mann and built in 1891, with an addition in 1909. It is a 3-story L-plan brick building in the Richardsonian Romanesque style. It has a hipped roof, limestone ornamentation, and details, and a round corner tower. Atop the tower is what looks like a plaster nipple. What was there? 1 year to build? Yeah, that makes sense.
Livestock Exchange Building is a historic commercial building located at St. Joseph, Missouri. It was designed by architect Edmund Jacques Eckel, 1845 to 1934, and built in 1898 to 1899. It is a 4-story red brick and stone building with neoclassical style ornamentation. 1 year to build. Scaffolding around what used to be a little tower with spire we can see in the pictures. Arches in the middle of the building. Looks like brick structure was built around older structure of stone almost.
St. Joseph Public Library, also known as Free Public Library, Public Museum, Public Library, and Board of Education Building, is a historic library building located at St. Joseph, Missouri. The library has over 9,000 books. It was designed by the architect Edmund Jacques Eckel, 1845 to 1934 and built in 1901 to 1902 in the French Baroque style. It is two-story, brick and reinforced concrete, sheathed in beige marble and limestone. 1 year to build, very classical looking.
Dr. Jacob Geiger House, Maud Wyeth Painter House, also known as the United Missouri Bank, is a historic home located at St. Joseph, Missouri. It was designed by the architectural firm of Eckel and Aldrich and built in 1911 to 1912. It is a 2.5-story Gothic Revival style masonry building with a 3-story crenellated tower and a 2-story crenellated tower. It features an arcaded porch and a 4-bay bow window with gargoyles. Wow. Whose house have you ever heard of becoming a bank? And another 1 year to build on top of it? Okay.
St. Joseph City Hall is a historic city hall located at St. Joseph, Missouri. It was designed by the architectural firm Eckel and Aldrich and built in 1926 to 1927. It is a 3-story stone and concrete building in the Italian Renaissance Revival style. It features a concrete balustrated loggia on the second level, engaged columns, arched openings, and a red tile hipped roof. Another 1 year build, another revival, coming in at only 3 stories, but they seem massively tall on the first and second floors, making for huge ceilings. Arches are prominent on this building.
Now we have the DeKalb County Courthouse, which is a historic courthouse located in Maysville, DeKalb County, Missouri. It was designed by George R. Eckel of Eckel and Aldrich and built in 1939. It is a low red brick building with concrete bands and modern-style details. It consists of a 3-story main block with 2-story flanking wings. The building measures 110 feet by 55 feet. Next we have, courtesy of Google Images, the Christ Episcopal Church on 207 North 7th Street, St. Joseph, Missouri, in 1877, listed under the only entry for Eckel under Steigers, Boatner, and Company 1874 to 1877. This makes it seem like he was the designer for the building, but we know this is not necessarily always the case. Nottoway County Courthouse is a historic courthouse located at Maryville, Nottoway County, Missouri. It was designed by the architectural firm Eckel and Mann. Construction began in 1882, but it was not completed and ready for occupancy until the spring of 1883. It is a 2-story, high Victorian, Italianate-style rectangular brick building. It measures approximately 111 feet 6 inches long and 76 feet wide. It has a truncated hipped roof with massive cornice. It features a tower, recessed portico, and ornamental stonework. On the side of the wiki page it says built 1881. Which is it? Did it take 1 year or negative 1 year to build? Also seen here is another example of a tower, or what the French call chateau. Next we have the Ringgold County Courthouse at 109 West Madison Street, Mount Ayr, Iowa. In 1883 it was demolished. This building looks similar to the last 2 buildings, with the main feature being a tower, as we see in the Ringgold. A courthouse was built in the spring of 1856 in Mount Ayr. During a session of court on June 8, 1858, a cyclone, blew down the courthouse and many records disappeared off in the wind. For a cost of $3,500, a new courthouse was built of native lumber. This courthouse was burned to the ground on Thanksgiving Day, 1889. Fortunately, in 1883, construction of a third courthouse had already begun. This brick and stone building was completed for a cost of $36,455. In 1921, the building was condemned and given along with $500 in cash to a house record to be torn down.
The Gentry County Courthouse is a historic courthouse located at Albany, Gentry County, Missouri. It was designed by the architectural firm Eckel and Mann and built in 1884 to 1885 by Rufus K. Allen. It is a two-story high Victorian or Ruscinian Gothic-style brick building with a central tower. It has a symmetrical plan, semi-elliptical arches, and a prominent hipped slate roof. We have arches and a tower on this one. Are we seeing the pattern? Another one-year build?
We have the German American Bank Building as a historic bank building located at St. Joseph, Missouri. It was built in 1889 and is a six-story rectangular brick building designed in Richardsonian Romanesque style with added Beaux Arts detailing. The bank originally was created to provide service to the large number of German-speaking citizens in the region. In 1918, it was renamed the American National Bank. Later, it became First Federal Savings and Loan. Another one-year build for a six-story Romanesque style with all the ornamentation.
St. Louis City Hall was designed by architects Eckel and Mann, the winners of a national competition. 1. Construction began in July 1890 and completed in 1904. Its profile and stylistic characteristics evoke the French Renaissance Hôtel de Ville, Paris, with an elaborate interior decorated with marble and gold trim. This entry states Eckel and Mann were winners of the competition. Let's see about that. We'll come back to this point in a few.
Let's now take a look at the architect that, according to our sources, designed the City Hall building in St. Louis. According to the Wikipedia page here, George Richard Mann, July 12, 1856 to March 20th, 1939, was an American architect trained at MIT whose designs included the Arkansas State Capitol. He was the leading architect in Arkansas from 1900 until 1930. And his designs were among the finalists in competitions for the capitals of several states. Many of Mann's works are listed on the U.S. National Register of Historic Places. Now, what is interesting here is at first glance, we question if this is even the correct architect here. There's no mention on this wiki page of Mann designing the St. Louis City Hall. It is not listed under his works, and there's no mention of Eckel or even St. Joseph, Missouri at all. If we look to an alternative source for Mann's bio, we can see that this is indeed the correct architect, but he became more known for designs built in Arkansas. So now we see, according to this Arkansas biography on the Encyclopedia of Arkansas website,
After Mann graduated in 1876, he then worked for 2 years for a New York firm, McKim, Mead & White, a highly respected and enormously busy firm that became the largest architectural office in the world. Mann wrote in an autobiographical sketch that he developed a friendship with Stanford White, the partner who was considered the most adventuresome artist of the three influential partners. The firm adopted classicism using details that adhered to Renaissance, Georgian, and Roman sources. Mann's own building designs were to reflect the influence of that firm.
In 1879, Mann returned to the Midwest and opened an office in Minneapolis, but the following year he moved to St. Joseph, Missouri, where the construction industry was very busy. Oh, really? He became a partner in a small firm and designed buildings to be built not only in Missouri, but also in Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, Illinois, and Texas.
Not found on his wiki page, but it appears on the Arkansas website, is the memorial temple of this one dude, which is the headquarters of the local governing body of these other dudes in the Arkansas Grand Lodge. It was built to replace the original temple of those one dudes located on 5th and Main Streets, which was destroyed by fire in 1919, believe it or not. The building is owned by the ancient and accepted, they're the Scottish dudes, and houses another local section of those other dudes, which is the York Rite bodies. The one dude has a temple, and it's a historic temple for those other dudes, and it's located at 700 to 724 Scott Street in Little Rock, Arkansas. It is an imposing 3-story classical revival structure finished in limestone and featuring a long colonnade of 40 foot, that's 12 meters, Ionic columns on its front facade, which occupies half of a city block. Now, entry is gained to the building via 3 sets of massive bronze doors flanked by stone eagles. Completed in 1924, it was designed by local
Those other dudes.
George R. Mound and Eugene Stern. It is named in honor of the one main dude, another one-year build to start off the list of Mound's works. Also, what is interesting is that this building is directly across the streets from the first work listed on Mound's wiki page. Believe that or not.
Now, same dude, that one guy with those other dudes, he has a residence hotel, which is a historic commercial building at 701 South Scott Street in Little Rock, Arkansas. The hotel was built in 1929 by the Farrell Hotel Company at an approximate cost of a whopping $1 million. It was designed by architect Eugene John Stern in the Italian-Spanish Revival style. The 2 main wings are 8 stories each and extend out towards Scott Street. These 2 wings are connected across the back by a 10-story cross-section. Here we notice it has Stern as the architect and Mann is not listed at all. We also see this Stern is the same architect that is credited with Mann on the previous building. Another 1-year build for the list.
Now, this is from Wiki. The Arkansas State Capitol, often called the Capitol Building, is the home of the Arkansas General Assembly and the seat of the Arkansas state government that sits atop Capitol Hill at the eastern end of the Capitol Mall in Little Rock, Arkansas. In 1899, the St. Louis architect George R. Mann visited the governor of Arkansas, Daniel W. Jones, and presented his drawing of his winning competition design from 1896 for the Montana State Capitol, which had not yet been built in their state capital of Helena. They were hung on the walls of the old Capitol to generate interest in a new building. The drawing's attractiveness eased the passage of the appropriation bills for the new building and also drew attention to the architect. In 1899, Mann was selected as an architect by 7-member commission that included future Governor George W. Donaghy. Now, Donaghy opposed Mann's selection and advocated a national design competition, but the majority of the commission voted for Mann. After Donaghy was elected governor in 1908, he forced Mann off the project and selected Cass Gilbert to finish the Capitol.
Construction took 16 years from 1899 to 1915. The Capitol was built on the site of the state penitentiary, and prisoners helped construct the building. They lived in a dormitory that was left on the Capitol grounds while construction was taking place. The Capitol foundations were aligned incorrectly by their original builder, future Governor George Donaghy. He centered the building on the center line of 5th Street, now Capitol Avenue, but he aligned the building north to south using the still standing penitentiary walls as a guide without recognizing that Fifth Street was not aligned east to west like other east to west downtown Little Rock streets. It runs parallel to the Arkansas River at a slight angle off true east-west. Therefore, the structure is in a north to south manner from end to end, which does not fit the grid street pattern of Little Rock's downtown. This also led to a slight S-curve in the formal entrance walkway between the foot of Capitol Avenue and the front steps of the Capitol. The misalignment seems suspicious here. The fact that it does not line up with the rest of downtown makes it seem like it was there first, possibly. Such a huge difference when we see a normal building period for such a massive structure. This one stating it took 16 years to build.
The George R. Mann Building, also known as the Atkins Building, is a historical commercial building at 115 East 5th Street in Little Rock, Arkansas. Built in 1906 to design by local architect George R. Mann, it is an important local example of Beaux Arts architecture and served as the site of Mann's office until 1912.
Despite the building's comparatively modest scale, it has a monumental appearing facade, with two-story fluted columns set on a paneled stone post with angled Ionic capitals supporting a heavily carved entablature. A line of dentil molding separates that from a projecting modillioned cornice topped by a series of cartouches with a recessed parapet behind. Another one-year build for the list? Next we have the Gus Blast Department Store, which is a historic commercial building at 318 to 324 Main Street in Little Rock, Arkansas. It is a 7-story masonry structure built in 1912 to a design by George Mann, a leading Arkansas architect, apparently. It was one of the first instances of two-way concrete slab construction in the nation and was one of the first department stores in the state to be air-conditioned in 1936. The Blast Department Store was for many years the city's largest department store and remained in business here until the 1970s, ultimately becoming a part of the Dillard's department store chain before closing in 1972. Another one-year build, a 7-story building. Moving on.
The next entry under Mann's works on his wiki page states, one or more works in El Dorado Commercial Historic District Courthouse Square, portions of Main, Jefferson, Washington, Jackson, Cedar, and Locust Streets, El Dorado, Arkansas, Mann, George R., and Howard Stern. That's NRHP listed. Now, here we see Mann associated with another Stern, but not the same Stern as the one before. Howard instead of Eugene. What stands out is the one or more works. Are we just guessing now? That's from Wiki page. The El Dorado Commercial Historic District encompasses the historic commercial heart of downtown El Dorado, Arkansas. The city serves as the seat of the Union County and experienced a significant boom in growth during the 1920s after oil was discovered in the area. The business district that grew in this time is anchored by the Union County Courthouse at the corner of Main and Washington Streets, where the Confederate Memorial is also located.
Now this wiki entry lists the Union County Courthouse, which is a courthouse in El Dorado, Arkansas, United States. The county seat of Union County, built in 1927. It was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1983. The courthouse was built in the classic Revival and Greek Revival styles by Mann and Stern and anchors the center of Union Square, Another Mann and Stern collaboration here, not listed under Mann's works on his wiki page. That only took 1 year to produce, another 1 year build.
From Wiki, we have the Fort Smith. It's the temple of those one dudes, and is a historic building at 200 North 11th Street in Fort Smith, Arkansas. It is a large stone-walled structure with styling that is in an Art Deco influenced version of Egyptian Revival architecture. Its main northwest-facing facade has a projecting central section from which a series of bays are progressively stepped back, unified by a band of decorative carving at the top, just below the flat roof. The central portion has slightly projecting pilaster-like sections, flanking 3 recessed bays, which are divided by 2 fluted pilasters and topped by decorative carved stonework and a panel identifying the building. The entrance is set in the center bay, recessed under a projecting square frame. The building was designed by Little Rock architect George R. Mann and completed in 1929. It is one of the few buildings in Arkansas to exhibit Egyptian Revival styling, which is particularly pronounced in the building's interior decoration. Another connection for those one dudes and Mann in Arkansas. Egypt and America. And in Arkansas? Who knew? What's the connection? America and Egypt? America is Egypt. You never know.
Next up, we have the wiki page of the Gazette building in downtown Little Rock, Arkansas. It was built in 1908, designed by architect George R. Mann and built by Peter Hotz. The building was listed on the U.S. National Register of Historic Places in 1976. Originally and for many years, the building served as the headquarters of the Arkansas Gazette newspaper. After the Gazette was sold and became the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, the building served as the national campaign headquarters for the 1992 presidential campaign of Governor Bill Clinton. It now houses the elementary and middle schools for E-STEM public charter schools. Looks like another 1 year build. Massive build under 1 year. Amazing.
From Wiki. Bentley Hotel, usually known as the Hotel Bentley, is a classic Renaissance-style hotel located near City Hall in downtown Alexandria in central Louisiana. On the wiki page on the side, it says built in 1907 and opened in 1908, with the architect listed as George R. Mann. Another year build is what we're seeing again. How could that be?
Next up, we have on the wiki page of the Hotel Pines is a historic commercial building at the northwest corner of West 5th and Main Streets in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. It is a large 6-story U-shaped masonry structure with a 2-story section filling the center of the U. The center section has a portico projecting over the sidewalk with classical revival detailing and paired columns for support. Built in 1913 and in operation as a hotel until 1970, it was Pine Bluff's grandest hotel. On the wiki page on the side, it says built 1910 with the architect listed as George R. Mann. Built 2 different years, measure once, build twice. What are we working with here?
From Wiki. Under Mann's works on his wiki page, it says Little Rock Central High School, 1500 Park Street, Little Rock, Arkansas. Now it's listed as Almon, Deloney, Mann, Stern, and Wittenberg. We see a couple familiar names in there. Mann and Stern, Little Rock Central High School, LRCH, is an accredited, comprehensive public high school in Little Rock, Arkansas, United States. Central is located at the intersection of Little Rock 9 Way, that's a section of Park Street, designated in September 2022, and Daisy L. Gatson Bates Drive, which was formerly 14th Street. Central can trace its origins to 1869, when the Sherman School operated in a wooden structure at 8th and Sherman Streets.
Now in 1885, the Sherman School was moved to 14th and Scott Streets and was named Scott Street School, but was more commonly called City High School. 5 years later, in 1890, the Peabody School was constructed at West Capitol and Gaines Streets. It was named in honor of philanthropist George Peabody from the $200,000 U.S. received via the Peabody Education Fund. Now in 1905, the city founded Little Rock High School at the intersection of 14th and Cumberland Streets and shuttered the Peabody and Scott Street schools to serve as the city's sole public high school.
In 1927, at a cost of $1.5 million US dollars, the city completed construction on the nation's largest and most expensive high school facility, which remains in use today. In 1953, with the construction of Hall High School, the school was renamed as Little Rock Central High School. It has since been listed on the U.S. National Register of Historic Places and named as a U.S. National Historic Landmark and National Historic Site. On the wiki page, on the side, it says founded in 1927, with the architect listed as John Parks Mound. Where did man go? A lot of name changing we see to confuse, it seems. The whole thing is confusing.
Next up, we have the wiki page of the Pulaski County Courthouse, which is located at 405 West Markham Street in downtown Little Rock, Arkansas, the state capital and the county seat of Pulaski County. It is set among a number of other state and city government buildings on a city block bounded by West Markham, Spring, West 2nd, and South Broadway streets, with a county park occupying the western portion of the block. The courthouse has two portions, an elaborate Romanesque edifice built of stone and brick in 1887 to 1889 to a design by Max A. Orlop, and a large 4-story Beaux Arts annex designed by George Mann and added in 1913 to 14. The annex is acknowledged as one of Mann's most successful commissions. We see here another tower, a 2-year build and 1-year annex. Successful indeed.
This is from Wiki. The Hotel Riceland is listed on the National Register of Historic Places and is located on the southwest corner of 3rd Street and South Main Street in downtown Stuttgart, Arkansas. Construction began in 1919 with the grand opening in 1923. The hotel closed in 1970. The luxurious 5-story hotel was designed by none other than George R. Mann, complete with a rooftop garden. It is the largest commercial building in Stuttgart.
Next, we have the wiki page of the Rose Building, which is a historic commercial building at 307 Main Street in Little Rock, Arkansas. Was built in 1900 from the plans of George R. Mann and is named for Arkansas Supreme Court Chief Justice U.M. Rose. It is a prominent local example of commercial classical revival architecture. The building was built originally as an office property and by the early to mid-20th century housed retail when the city's main street was the major shopping district. Now, Rose purchased 3 lots on the Peyton block of Main Street by 1880. Judge Rose built 2 pre-existing Rose buildings, both destroyed by fire on the current location. The existing structure is a 1916 incarnation of the Rose building built by Rose's son. It is vastly different from the previous two structures. The two-story structure now displays a symmetrically massed neoclassical facade designed by George R. Mann. Mann was the architect who designed the existing Arkansas state capitol and the man on the main mentioned above. Built 1900 and 1916 by Rose's son. We have a fire story. This story doesn't make any sense. Peyton Block of Main Street does not seem to exist. Did Mann design two different Rose buildings, one in 1900 and the one from 1916? It is like in the movie Ronin. There is no boathouse. There is no Peyton Block of Maine. On the map, it looks like they run parallel on opposite sides of the city. Come on.
From Wiki. St. Vincent's Hospital was a Catholic hospital in Normandy, Missouri. In 1858, the Sisters of Charity founded St. Vincent's Sanitarium for those with nervous and mental diseases. The hospital was located on St. Vincent's Lane, north of St. Charles Rock Road. It is the current home of the Castle Park Apartments. It opened in August 1858 at 9th and Marion Streets in St. Louis with 4 patients and 15 sisters. In 1895, the home relocated to St. Vincent's Lane, that's the current Castle Park Drive, up a hilltop from the Rock Road in St. Louis County. The massive castle-like building is listed on the National Register of Historic Places.
The 1930 U.S. Census lists 357 individuals. The home was in part financed by the patient's fees. By 1941, the home was operated by the Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul for the treatment of mental and nervous disorders, as well as selected cases of alcoholism and drug addiction. The home remained in existence until the 1980s. On the wiki page for this building, to the side it gives a built date of 1893, and architect credit to George R. Mann and Harvey Ellis in the architectural style of Renaissance. So it's a brick Renaissance castle. The best part, it only took 1 year to build. You might as well just say the mental patients built it before they went mental. It cannot get much more mental than this. You'd have to be mental to believe this stuff.
From Wiki. The Union Life Building is an 11-story high-rise at 212 Center Street in downtown Little Rock, Arkansas. It was designed by Arkansas architect George R. Mann in the style of the Chicago School and was built in 1911 to 1916. It is T-shaped in footprint with brick curtain wall construction on all sides except the main facade, which is faced in terracotta tile and glass. The first 2 levels of the facade are crowned by an ornate cornice. Its second level segmented arch windows echoed in windows and an arch design at the top of the building. It is Little Rock's only major example of Chicago-style commercial architecture. 5 years to build this seems more realistic. The building is very modern but still has ornate details. It looks like we are moving from one period to another with this example.
Now our last example in this section for George R. Mann builds is the Worthen Bank building, which is a historic commercial building at 401 Main Street in downtown Little Rock, Arkansas. It is a 2-story masonry structure with neoclassical and Art Deco lines. It has a steel frame and is faced in limestone. 3 bays of 3-part windows stand on the second floor, and 2 flank the center entry. The building was constructed in 1928 for the Worthen Bank. Founded in 1877, later merged into St. Louis-based Boatman's Bank Shares, itself integrated into Bank of America, and was designed by George R. Mann, a prominent local architect otherwise known for his design of the Arkansas State Capitol. Annexes and a parking garage were added in 1952 and 1962, along with some modernization of the 1928 building. Another one-year build. Again, the more contemporary modern style Art Deco and neoclassical. Definitely different looking than some of our other examples. Classical Revival listed on the side of the wiki page.
Something similar. Our City Hall building, if you recall, is in the style of French Renaissance. Revival, and the design by Mann was inspired by the Hotel de Ville, aka City Hall, in Paris, France. The Hotel de Ville, French pronunciation, Hotel de Ville, City Hall, is the City Hall of Paris, France, standing on the Place de l'Hôtel de Ville, Esplanade de la Libération, in the 4th arrondissement. The south wing was originally constructed by Francois I, beginning in 1535 and until 1551. The north wing was built by Henry IV and Louis XIII between 1605 and 1628. It was burned by the Paris Commune along with all the city archives that it contained during the Semaine Sanglante, the Commune's final days, in May 1871. The outside was rebuilt following the original design, but larger between 1874 and 1882, while the inside was considerably modified. It has been the headquarters of the municipality of Paris since 1357. It serves multiple functions, housing the local government council since 1977, the mayors of Paris and their cabinets, and also serves as a venue for large receptions.
Now, in July 1357, Etienne Marcel, provost of the merchants, i.e. mayor, of Paris, bought the so-called Maison à Piliers, House of Pillars, in the name of the municipality on the gently sloping shingle beach which served as a river port for unloading wheat and wood, and later merged into a square, the Place de Grève, Strand Square, a place where Parisians often gathered, particularly for public executions. Ever since 1357, the city of Paris's administration has been located on the same location where the Hotel de Ville stands today. Before 1357, the city administration was located in the so-called Parloir aux Bourgeois, Parlor of the Burgesses, near the Châtelet.
In 1533, King Francis I decided to endow the city with a city hall which would be worthy of Paris, then the largest city of Europe and Christendom. He appointed 2 architects, Italian Dominique de Coton, nicknamed Bacador because of his red beard, and Frenchman Pierre Chambiggs. The House of Pillars was torn down, and Bacador, steeped in the spirit of the Renaissance, drew up the plans of a building which was at the same time tall, spacious, full of light, and refined. Building work was not finished until 1628 during the reign of Louis XIII. During the next 2 centuries, no changes were made to the edifice, which was the stage for several famous events during the French Revolution.
Now, a quick sidebar. Many of these examples in this section, similar buildings to the St. Louis City Hall, are called chateaus. According to the dictionary.com, The definition of chateau is as follows. Definition 1, in France, a castle or fortress. Definition 2, a stately residence imitating a distinctively French castle. Definition 3, a country estate, especially a fine one, in France or elsewhere on the continent. Definition 4, often initial capital letter, a wine grower's estate, especially in the Bordeaux region of France, often used as part of the name of a wine.
Next up, we have the Chateau de Beaumesnil. Chateau de Beaumesnil is a 17th century Louis XIII Baroque style chateau located in the commune and close to the village of Beaumesnil in Eure department of Normandy and northern France. The chateau, now an official historical monument of France, is surrounded by a moat, having been built on the site of a medieval castle of the same name. Construction started in 1633, believe it or not, and completed in 1640, Baroque style.
Next, we have the Chateau Impney. We have the wiki page here for the Chateau Impney Hotel and Exhibition Center, which is a Grade 2 listed 19th century house built in the style of an elaborate French chateau near Droitwich Spa in Worcester, England. Of the large mansions in Worcester supported by industrial fortunes, Sir Nicholas Pevsner judged Impney to be, quote, the showiest of them all in the county, end quote. Also, once a family home for local industrialist John Corbett, Chateau Impney has been a hotel since 1925, built in 1873 to 75, so 2-year build, style of an elaborate French chateau in England, 106 rooms.
Fermont-le-Château Frontenac, commonly referred to as the Château Frontenac. The Fermont-le-Château Frontenac, commonly referred to as the Château Frontenac, is a historic hotel in Quebec City, Quebec, Canada. The hotel is situated in Old Quebec within the historic district's upper town on the southern side of Place des Armes. The Château Frontenac was designed by Bruce Price and was built by the Canadian Pacific Railway Company. Groundbreaking May 1892 and opened December in 1893. 18 floors, 610 rooms, and 4 restaurants, less than 20 months to originally build. Yeah, right. Moving on.
All right, next up, we have the Palace of Versailles. Looking at the wiki tab, Louis XIII built a simple hunting lodge on the site of the Palace of Versailles in 1623. With his death came Louis XIV, who expanded the chateau into the beginnings of a palace that went through several changes and phases from 1661 to 1715. It was a favorite residence for both kings, and in 1682, Louis XIV moved the seat of his court and government to Versailles, making the palace the de facto capital of France. This state of affairs was continued by Kings Louis XV and XVI, who primarily made interior alterations to the palace. But in 1789, the royal family and capital of France returned to Paris. For the rest of the French Revolution, the Palace of Versailles was largely abandoned and emptied of its contents, and the population of the surrounding city plummeted. An example of classicalism and Baroque style. Construction started 1661. That's 363 years ago, according to the narrative.
With that being said, if we look at the history, some of the dates that accompany the pictures make the narrative fuzzy at the least. In 1623, Louis XIII, King of France, built a hunting lodge on a hill and a favorite hunting ground 19 kilometers, that's 12 miles, west of Paris, and 16 kilometers, 10 miles, from his primary residence, the Château de Saint-Germain in Laye. The site near a village named Versailles was a wooded wetland that Louis XIII's court scorned as being generally unworthy of a king. One of his courtiers, François de Basseterre, wrote that the lodge would not inspire vanity in even the simplest gentleman. From 1631 to 1634, architect Philibert Leroy replaced the lodge with a chateau for Louis XIII, who forbade his queen, Anne of Austria, from staying there overnight, even when an outbreak of smallpox at Saint-Germain and Laye in 1641 forced Louis XIII to relocate to Versailles with his 3-year-old heir and the future Louis XIV.
When Louis XIII died in 1643, Anne became Louis XIV's regent, and Louis XIII's chateau was abandoned for the next decade. She moved the court back to Paris, where Anne and her chief minister, Cardinal Mazarin, continued Louis XIII's unpopular monetary practices. Louis XIV had hunted at Versailles in the 1650s, but did not take any special interest in Versailles until 1661. On August 17, 1661, Louis XIV was a guest at a sumptuous festival hosted by Nicolas Fouquet, the superintendent of finances, at his palatial residence, the Château de Vaux-la-Vicomte. Louis XIV was impressed by the chateau and its gardens, which were the work of Louis Laval, the court architect, since 1654, André Lenotre, the royal gardener, since 1657, and Charles Lebrun, a painter in royal service since 1647. Vaux-le-Vicomte's scale and opulence inspired Louis XIV's aesthetic sense, but also led him to imprison Fouquet that September, as he had also built an island fortress and a private army.
Louis XIV was also inspired by Vaux-le-Vicomte, and he recruited its authors for his own projects. Louis XIV replaced Fouquet with Jean-Baptiste Colbert, a protégé of Mazarin, an enemy of Fouquet, and Colbert acted as the intermediary between them and Louis XIV, who personally directed and inspected the planning and construction of Versailles. Engraving by Jacques Gambouste. Looks like a star fort in this picture. Check it out.
Here we have Philibert Leroy, his wiki page here, with a picture of the garden facade of Leroy's new chateau at Versailles, after an engraving by Israel Silvestri. From 1631, Leroy was employed in the creation of a small chateau replacing the existing hunting lodge. This phase of construction was completed in 1634. Now, if we compare this with the picture, the Cour des Marbre at Versailles, beneath the rich ornamentation, is the three-winged chateau of Philibert Leroy. Interesting.
Next up, we have the Chicago City Hall. The first Chicago City Hall in 1837 was in leased chambers in the Saloon Building on the corner of Lake and Clark Streets. The city next leased space in a building owned by Nancy Chapman from 1842 until 1848. when Old Market Hall was constructed in LaSalle Street. The city-owned Market Hall held city council businesses on its second floor with shops below until 1853. A new combined city hall and county courthouse was then constructed in the public square made by Randolph, LaSalle, Washington, and Clark Streets. This building, which later burned, is sometimes referred to as Old Chicago Courthouse. President Abraham Lincoln's body lay in state at the old courthouse, City Hall, prior to his burial in Springfield in 1865. The courthouse bell was rung in 1871 to raise the alarm during the Great Chicago Fire before the hall burned to the ground.
A hastily constructed hall nicknamed the, quote, Old Rookery was built around a water tank that survived the fire at LaSalle and Adams Streets. Today, that site houses the Rookery Building, built in 1888. Now, in 1885, the city and county completed construction of a new combined building in the French Empire style at the present site and the site of the old courthouse. This building was demolished and replaced in 1905 by the present and larger Classical Revival structure. According to its wiki entry, the caption on this photo says, "The 6th City Hall Building, 1886 to 1905, in the French Empire style, was quickly outgrown." This is just preposterous.
So we figured we'd use the AI to help us answer some questions and wrap our minds around this subject. So we asked the AI, how long would it take to construct a city hall building in French Renaissance style? And so the answer it comes up with is that the time to construct a city hall building in French Renaissance style can vary widely depending on several factors. A, the materials. So the availability of materials, their transportation, it can significantly impact the construction time. See, some materials, they may need to be imported, some may be local, and this can impact the timeline and the cost. So keep that in mind. Then we have the availability of skilled labor, such as architects, so that's plural. Engineers, that's a big one. We're going to come back to that later. Masons and carpenters can influence construction time. So a red flag that we noticed was so far, none of these buildings list any of the engineers that were present. The construction engineer is responsible for preparing the site, determining procedures that will economically and safely yield the desired quality, directing the placement of materials, and organizing the personnel and equipment. And that's from Britannica.com. So as you can see, the engineer would be crucial, just as much or equally as crucial as the architect. So you think they would list at least one engineer, and according to the AI, we would need several. So this poses the question, what school was producing these engineers that could prepare the job site, materials, and procedures? So what is built from and how they're executing the work in as little as 1 to 2 years in some of these cases. So you have to factor that in, especially when, according to the narrative, that it took a year from breaking the ground until the cornerstone was laid. So keep that all into consideration. Also, the engineers, plural, according to the AI, would be just as crucial as the architects. Yet again, there's zero mentions. So project management, efficient project management can streamline the process or get it delayed significantly. Also, weather Has to be factored in. There are some very cold winters in St. Louis. Next, we asked how long did it take to build municipal buildings in the mid to late 1800s. Okay, so the AI timeline varied depending on factors such as location, available resources, technology, as well as complexity of the project. And so as we can see, some of these buildings are vastly complex, to say the least. So projects in the 19th century generally took longer due to less advanced machinery and transportation, from a few years to decades to complete. So I want you to wrap your mind around that. Manual labor was relied on heavily in the 1800s. Now, skilled craftsmen such as masons, carpenters, and blacksmiths worked with basic hand tools, which often slowed the process compared to today with modern technologies. Now, materials were sourced locally or regionally, and you have to factor in transportation. That was much slower than it is today. Designs and planning, architectural designs were often intricate and very detailed, requiring careful planning and coordination. So without CAD software, that's computer aided design, or what architects refer to as CAD, architects and engineers relied on hand-drawn plans and models. So again, that's going to slow down the process significantly, taking all this into consideration. And then construction, okay? Construction will be disrupted by weather. Always, you have to figure that in. So clearly it took longer, and it was not as efficient to construct buildings of this scale with such artistry, given the timeline and the narrative. Okay, so we asked the AI, what percentage of people were architects? It responded, the percentage of people in America who were architects would have been relatively small compared to the total population. Architecture is a specialized profession requiring formal education, training, and licensure. So just think about the actual number of architects when we're actually doing all this research on these buildings. Think about that. Think about, why are there no engineers that are actually listed? So architecture required formal education and training. The percentage of architects in the U.S. is relatively small, meaning there's not that many architects in the U.S. compared to the total population. Yet it says that there were people, master builders allegedly, whatever that means, and other individuals that were certainly recognized as architects. Okay, so then we ask, how many people in the United States were architects in the early 19th century? Then it goes on and states that there were certainly individuals who were recognized as architects and contributed significantly. Then, of course, we're given a list of alleged architects that were notable. So Benjamin Henry Latrobe, Charles Bulfinch, and then we have Thomas Jefferson, Asher Benjamin, and William Strickland. And then it says it's difficult to estimate the exact number of architects practicing. They would have been relatively low. So food for thought on that one. We then asked what percentage of people were architects in the 20th century. The latest update in 2022 of American Institute of Architects reported that there were approximately 116,000 licensed architects, and this includes those who are licensed and may not be active in the profession. So, total population of U.S. during the 20th century ranged from 76 million in the 1900s to 281 by 2000. Okay? Now, given these figures, the percentage of people in America who were architects in the 20th century would have been likely under 1% of the total population. So think about it logically. You need blueprints, schematics. You have to have dimensions that are mathematically precise and structurally sound, a workable plan, procedures that are feasible, and then that also yield you the end result of the actual building. So that's what we see. We don't see any blueprints on file or any that we can see, or for that fact, any blueprints, engineers, or companies. All they mention ever is the architect, and then with a drawing of the facade. Think about it. Now, which would only make sense if the building predates the drawing. Then you would only need illustrators to make the actual drawing. That's all that you would need present. Seems to be that there's a school in 1824 where the first classes were offered for engineers. Absent of architects and engineers, in early times we see more drawings than photos. So think about that. There's another red flag for you. AI concludes by stating that architecture remains a specialized field, and while of individuals engaged remained relatively small compared to other professions. So that means there's not a lot of practicing architects in compared to other professions. Now, we ask what percentage of people were skilled builders in the 19th century? Estimating a number of skilled builders is rough due to the limited historical data and variations across regions and time. So think about that. And then it says in the early mid-19th century, before rise of industrialization and standardized construction method, significant amount of the population would have been skilled trades such as carpenters, masons, blacksmith, plasterers, and various craftsmen. Important to note that the exact percentage of the population engaged in skilled trades vary widely depending on factors such as location, economic conditions, and immigration. Difficult to provide a precise percentage, but significant portions of the population would have been involved with skilled trades and building to some degree. We then asked how many people in the U.S. were skilled artisan builders in 19th century. We get the same answer, essentially. It's difficult to provide a precise percentage. It's reasonable to assume that a significant portion of the 19th century American population would have been involved in skilled building trades to some extent. Yeah, I believe you. And it's depending on the same aforementioned factors: location, economic conditions, and immigration. Lastly, how many national entries were submitted for the St. Louis, Missouri City Hall building? Guess what it says? It gives you an exact answer. No, it doesn't. It says the specific number of national entries submitted for the St. Louis City Hall design competition is not readily available. Yet these competitions were the upcoming display of the new talent in architects or the new architects on the scene. And firms showed new designs, naturally. Yet the information on the competition is not readily available somehow, some way.
Now we've reached that time We've collected all our information from all our sources. Now we're going to break everything down, little discussion, conclusions, and our list of red flags and inconsistencies. Top of the list goes the towers that we see all over the place being removed. St. Louis City Hall's building, their towers were removed in 1934, as we see in the pictures with the towers before that time. Now the question is, how many times and how many places has this been done? And it reminds me of the removing of spires on cathedrals.
So the towers being removed is interesting. I have to ask myself why. Pondering over the question, I've concluded that perhaps it was because of what they contained on the inside. Maybe they had paintings or murals on the inside. Maybe it was what it was decorated with on the outside. Maybe it's because with the towers intact, it's clearly a castle. Perhaps they could have housed bells, which were tuned to the degree so that when they chimed, they emitted a certain frequency or vibration that was healing. In any event, history and myth both are chock full of a tower or towers being removed or destroyed.
Number 2, we have the acid wash cleaning of the City Hall building. Now, it was last sandblasted in 1960. This horribly disfigured the building. They do not know how to maintenance these old buildings, and when they do, they cause negative reactions such as this acid wash on the City Hall building, proving they do not even know the composition of these buildings or what they're doing.
The acid wash seems to be a gross ignorance on how to properly maintenance the building, or this was a deliberate act to remove or cover up something. It's also strange that this seems to be the only building downtown that seems to have had this done to it. Strange indeed.
Number 3, we have Eckel credited on Wiki. As we see here, our reference to man being designed, selected, and shown under City Hall with Eckel on the Wiki. Wiki lists Edmund Eckel as founder of firm, so he is credited with St. Louis City Hall under his listed architectural works. If you search George R. Mann, this building is not listed under his works.
Seems that the narrative can't get its own story straight, with Eckel being credited. However, it's Mann's design that was selected. Yeah, I believe you.
Number 4 on the list is the number of design entries differ when considering the competition that was won to be selected for the St. Louis City Hall building design. Now, if we look at our sources here, we see on the Library of Congress website that for the design of the building was chosen from among 6 designs submitted through a national competition. Okay, so this source is giving us the number 6 for the amount of designs that were chosen from. Now here we have our St. Louis website where the commission chose the design out of 37 entries. 37 versus 6. That's a big difference. Now, if you look at the Chat GPT, it says the specific number of national entries in the competition is not readily available in its current data. Very peculiar. Next, we have number 5, with the biography is weird for the designer of man, as we look at the Arkansas website with the different, more complete biography mentioning Missouri, whereas Wikipedia doesn't mention Missouri at all, nor does it mention City Hall under his name, and St. Louis isn't under his works. It's very peculiar indeed as well.
We see the same inconsistencies with the bio for man. Seems that the narrative is having more issues with keeping the story straight.
Number 6 is an interesting one. Now, the question is the AI protecting the narrative? Now, the answers the AI gives seem like it doesn't have the contents of the internet to get information from, or it is being coy with the answers on purpose to protect the false narrative it is responsible for composing. Makes you really think.
AI seems to be protecting the narrative by giving very general answers.
Number 7, we have the same website showing an inconsistent narrative. On the STL mo.gov, the dates of construction differ. We have dates of the St. Louis City Hall at the corner of 12th and Market Street was constructed between 1892 and 1904. Then we have on the same website on a different page, the construction of City Hall started July 19th, 1890, with Mayor Edward Noonan's daughter Zoe breaking ground. The cornerstone was laid on June 6, 1891. So was it 1891 or 1892? You be the judge. Number 8, chateaus, towers, and castles. Oh my. If the Founding Fathers were so animately against the monarchy and royalty in the United States, why then so quickly after we achieved independence did all of the states in the Union supposedly begin constructing these magnificent buildings to rival those supposedly much older buildings abroad, especially in Europe, that also served as the inspiration of many of these buildings?
The more we look at this magnificent building, it seems to be, in my opinion, resembling a castle. Chateau means large country house or castle.
Number 9, according to the mainstream narrative, with many of these municipal and old world style buildings, we see a pattern in their construction dates of around 2 years to complete. Many only a year, but that would make what I'm about to say even worse. We have seen in our example of the City Hall building in St. Louis that it took around 11 months from the breaking ground ceremony on July 19, 1890, to the cornerstone being laid on June 6, 1891. Considering this, if we account for excavation in construction, then a 2-year build is being cut in half, leaving 13 months to actually build the final structure at best. This is in a time when horses are the main transportation still. When you consider a 1-year build, it's just impossible. Monumental structures built in 30 days are your money back, it might as well be.
So any of these buildings that state a 2-year build, in my opinion, it's just not plausible, given that we have a timeline laying down for a year just to break ground and then lay the cornerstone.
Number 10. So how many buildings that we looked at were seemingly built in a year or less, like magic? According to my count, it was 17. Let us know in the comments if we missed any.
Moreover, the aforementioned timeline from groundbreaking to laying the cornerstone being almost a year, 11 months precisely, clearly demonstrates that a 2-year build or anything of that nature is just not possible, provided the means of transportation and communication that it would require just to coordinate the delivery of such materials in a timely manner.
Number 11. How many fires were part of the narrative? Let's count. 8 fires among our examples. Again, let us know in the comments if we missed any.
Here we go again, the fires. Just give me a break with them. We see that there's a fire story in almost any building that we look at, and any building that I've seen on YouTube, any of these documentaries on any of these buildings, there's always a fire story. Yeah, I believe you.
Number 12. Considering the Chicago City Hall example, which could be an entire video itself, first, of course, we have the fire narrative claiming the 5th building, and then with the 6th Chicago City Hall building, we have a picture when if you zoom in, you see a sign saying being wrecked, and at the bottom corner of the photo, we have the date of what appears August 18th of '08, 1908, presumably. If it's 1908 and the building is still there, how can we have the current building appearing completed, as the photo states, in 1911, a few years later, especially when the sixth building was supposed to be gone in 1905? On top of all of that, if you look back at the narrative, it lists for the seventh building dates, such as construction began in 1905 on the east wing, and by 1907 offices began moving in. Construction of west wing delayed until 1909, ran out of money, and the photo on the side states completed 1911. How can this be possible if we are looking at a photo from 1908? At this time, the narrative seems to insult our intelligence by trying to make us believe these type of structures can just be demolished and replaced almost instantly.
Pictures say 1,000 words, and this picture clearly shows a discrepancy with the dates provided, given the narrative. It's plausible. I'm sure there's probably a logical explanation. The more we scrutinize these buildings, the more obvious it becomes that there's a pattern with the fires, the 1 to 2 year builds, always having an architect listed, but never mentioning the engineer or engineers or any of the builders or any of the shipping companies for any of the materials or anything like that. In my opinion, the engineers, or lack thereof, seems to be a key point, or smoking gun, if you will, the elephant in the room. Think about it. The engineers would have been responsible for preparing the job site and procedures that will yield safely and economically the desired quality, directing the placement of materials and organizing the personnel and equipment. That's from Britannica. So essentially, the engineers are responsible for the how it was constructed, the methods to safely and economically yield the desired quality. Who were they? Are any of the engineers ever listed for any of these buildings? Ever? Who were the magnificent engineers that threw these buildings up in 1 to 2 years? Who were any of the engineers for any of the buildings? Ever? It seems that they're never mentioned. Food for thought. Every story you hear will impact your life, even if it's subtle. Even the word story phonetically sounds like store and E. So store, meaning a quantity or supply of something kept for use as needed. Then we have E. Makes me think of energy right off the bat. So a story could be energy or information passed on or kept inside a story or story. All stories can stimulate thoughts inside your mind, good or bad. His story is history. My story is a mystery. Our story is artistry. That's why these stories are so important. And even if they only affect your thoughts in the slightest, this can have a profound effect on your life, positively or negatively. Mahatma Gandhi said it best. Keep your thoughts positive, because your thoughts become your words. Keep your words positive, because your words become your behavior. Keep your behavior positive, because your behavior becomes your habits. Keep your habits positive, because your habits become your values. Keep your values positive, because your values become your life. Remember, it all started with a thought.
When questioning the narrative we have been given, we must first ask, what is a narrative other than a story one tells to another that will pay attention? The intention of the story may vary, just as the actions of the characters contained within. The narrator is to do their best to convince the audience to care about what is happening throughout the story's duration, and sometimes to even persuade them into believing everything that is happening is the truth. When the intention is truth, we as a society call such documented stories of past events history. When entertaining any story being told, we must ask ourselves, can we trust the reliability of the narrator? Stories can become very powerful in influencing the way people think and feel about any conceivable topic. So, if we have an unreliable narrator that is very convincing at telling a story, one that makes people believe everything they are being told is the truth, and one with the intentions or agenda to make people think and feel a certain way about all the topics that ensure the sustainability of the status quo, what would you call that? When questioning the narrative, we are also simultaneously questioning the narrator or author. We are questioning the reliability of the narrator and the entire story being told. Just as when looking at a building and judging its reliability, we would start with the architect and include the details of the entire construction to determine the integrity of not only the foundation, but the final completed product as a whole. Merely a simple analysis of what may be referred to as the mainstream narrative leaves one with many questions and very few answers, at least very few that make any sense. Living in a time where so much information is at so many people's fingertips, the truth of it all seems to be more fragmented and elusive than ever. In the United States, we have become more and more distrustful every day of not just our leaders and the media, but of nearly all of our once most sacred institutions. The scientific community as a whole and national governments have become completely unbelievable, especially when they have been caught in so many scandals and lies. It is because of this negative public sentiment, put simply, a people that believe everything they are being told is a lie, we now see a proliferation of topics that seemingly, if the mainstream narrative was true, should not even exist. Bylaws of the maritime along the canal birthed, come around full circle to reflect upon a flattened earth, in a temporal restart after the revelation came with the millennia reign, and as a result the beast was released as the short season began, with Judgment Day all that remains. All the years of destruction to blame for our history's reduction to a stain on the landscape, since ignorance left the once magnificent unable to maintain, like the truth in full glory never to be seen again. The question becomes then, what do we wish to gain other than an increasing discontent with the system that prevails, even by circumventing their trails, digging ever deeper in the dirt until at worst we hit bedrock? What then? Where can we even turn to get real solid, reliable answers, to get somewhere in this abyss, or at the least pointed in the right direction, keeping the hunt alive for the truth in whatever form we may find it in? The search for truth is like trying to find the moonlight on a dark and stormy night. It's there, it's just hidden from our sight.